Hey everyone, how's it going? This is Azren, the language nerd, as always, and today we have a guest yet again. I've been doing more podcasts with guests lately, usually with Calgary Language Nerd instructors, although we had that one exception, I think 2 episodes ago, where it was a newsletter follower. And today we have Logan, who teaches English, German, and a little bit of Danish to one person, one Danish student. English, Danish, and German at the Calgary Language Nerds. So, hello, Logan. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm doing well. So I'd like to start with the most interesting thing that I think we can talk about on this podcast, which is what your previous line of work was, and then now what you're doing as for your studies, but you're getting close to the finish line, and then what you plan to do for work after you finish your studies.
Sure. I'm actually a trained aircraft maintenance engineer, structures technician. That's a mouthful. So I usually just tell people aircraft mechanic because then they have a better idea of maybe what that entails. So I did that for 5-ish years. And then just kind of got tired of doing that. So right now I'm at university. I'm doing my bachelor's degree at 34 years old, and I'm doing a combined double degree in modern languages, French and Spanish, and education. And so hopefully in a couple of years, I'll be working in who knows, elementary, high school, teaching French or Spanish or various other languages, I guess, wherever I can find work. And yeah, sorry, I'm sure I didn't answer part of your question, but
No, you did just about
yeah,
what you
okay.
did, what you did before, and now what you're up to now.
Yeah.
What's it like being an aircraft mechanic? I know almost nothing about that as a job.
So it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of like hands-on work, as you can probably imagine. So I never had to work overnight, but lots of my coworkers did. So what basically happens is you come in to work and then you get a work order, which is there's something wrong with the plane or do something to the plane, and you have X amount of hours to do it. And if you're under that amount, everything's hunky dory, rainbows and sunshine. If you're over the amount of hours, then you start to get into an issue with your boss. And I was a person that was constantly over. So, yeah, it's very stressful. And the thing that I guess made me choose to turn away from the profession was because it's life's on the line, really. If you make a mistake, then people, yeah, it can have serious consequences. So I didn't like having that kind of hanging over my head all the time. And that's pretty much the reason why I got out. Also, looking at some of my coworkers that are like a lot older than me and seeing what their lives are like and how their bodies are kind of like crumbling from all the years of hard labor. And I thought, probably not for me. So now I'm kind of more like a desk jockey, which I think suits me more. Uh, yeah, so that's pretty much how I got here. Just
My
kind of
cousin said
wanting.
something, or not my cousin, well, not my cousin actually, but there's a relative in my family, not a cousin, but there's a relative in my family who said something very similar. He got a really good job when he first, this is years ago now, but when he first graduated university, he got a really good job in his field, high paying, good benefits. Like it's the dream, what you'd want after university. You get a good, high paying job, benefits, everything perfect kind of job. And then he's looking at his coworkers, older coworkers, and he said the exact same thing. He said, I look at what their lives are like and I don't want to be that person. And that's exactly why he quit that job and went in a completely different direction, kind of like you did. He said literally the same thing.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those careers where it's like you either love it or you start to hate it after a while. And I think the guys that hold on to that position for a long time, they eventually grow to hate it. And they just kind of they're looking for retirement. And I don't know about you, but I want to be able to kind of do stuff in my retirement, still be kind of able-bodied. So not that sitting around all the time is super healthy either, but like wanting to still have a life after work.
Hmm. A lot of I'm not sure about junior high and high school teachers, but a lot of elementary school teachers, they grow to strongly, many of them grow to strongly dislike their job because
That's fair.
it's it it's hard. It's really difficult.
Yeah.
You're dealing with these kids that don't always listen. You're spending half your time or a significant percentage of your time managing behavior and not teaching. And depending on what school you're teaching in, you might get some very challenging behavior students, which are a drain. Then if there's the typical politics, and as in any large, school board or really organization, there's always the politics, kind of like the quote unquote office politics, and this person did this, and that person's doing this, and then there's that drains you on it, and then it's a tough job. It's not easy.
It's definitely tough, but in a different way too.
Yeah, in a much different way, I would imagine, being an aircraft mechanic. So when you were doing that, did you like languages?
So that's in a way related to why I started to get into languages. So I guess I'll just kind of lay the story out here. So I went to Germany in, I think it was around Christmas time, 2013. And I went with my girlfriend at the time. Now she's my wife. And I didn't understand a lick of German. So we were at her relative's place, and they were all having a great time, drinking tea, like sitting around eating great food and having these great conversations, laughing, and I couldn't understand a word. So when I came back, I decided, and this was around the time my career was starting, like an aircraft mechanic. I decided that I'm going to really go for this. I'm going to learn German, and I didn't know much at all. So I started then, and then it turned out that we had a chance to actually go live in Germany. And it just so happened that the job was available in Germany as well. So because I started learning, I had that like, oh, I really want to learn German. But I also had another aspect to it is I have to if I'm going to work in Germany among German speakers. So once I got there, I actually had, I was doing like 20 hours a week of classes to get myself up to a level like conversational. And then after that, I was in a German speaking environment at work. So not just fully immersed, but like really immersed and having to use the language to get your job done every day. So that really helped me to develop my skills quickly and refine them. And they're very, I don't want to toot my own horn so much, but like really quite good and really like matching up with the colloquial spoken German of today. But I'm sure it's regressed since then. But at the time, I was like very, very good.
How many weeks or months did you do 20 hours a week of classes for before you started working?
That would probably be, let's say, 2 or 3 months, because in Germany they have this amazing thing. It's like a community college almost. It's called a Volkshochschule. And you can get basically, I'm not sure if it's subsidized, but it's extremely cheap lessons, group lessons for €2 an hour. So that's, I don't know, something like 350 maybe Canadian an hour. And yeah, so I just went hog wild and I took as many classes as I could because it was so cheap. And that's just not something that we offer here. Like, even if you're learning English, maybe you get into a program like that's sponsored by the government or something, but this is just like anyone can walk off the street and be like, I want to learn German. They'll give you a placement test and, 20 or €2 an hour, and you're off like full-time studying.
Wow.
So I did that for about, I think, 2 months. Yeah.
Okay.
Like
okay. So yeah, that's a lot. Like that's a lot. Plus you were in Germany, so even when you go out just in the street, like in a restaurant or something, you get to use a little bit of what you learned at least.
Yeah. And it's not one of those countries where everyone speaks English, like some of the European countries. It's like people speak English, but not to a super high level, and
Hmm.
especially not among the older generation. So you kind of have to you have to be able to speak the language to make yourself heard and to get your info out there.
Okay. When you were working, did you do anything else aside from working to keep learning German?
Yeah, actually, I was in Hamburg, and they, excuse me, they have like this kind of program through the libraries, where once a week there's a German speaking practice. So you just go there, and it's like no textbooks, no grammar, just go there and speak. And I was doing that every Saturday. So that was on top of, I think, a 35-hour work week, plus, like interactions on the street, interactions at the grocery store, and then another hour in the library that's focused on improving German for foreigners. At the time, I was also taking piano lessons in German, so that was another different um, another aspect of life that wasn't I didn't really plan on it, but that's also a good practice too, is to learn an instrument in another language. And strangely enough, because German doesn't have the same musical scale, I don't know if you know this, but somebody somewhere over the course of time screwed up, and like we have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and they have A, H, C, D, E, F, G. So for whatever reason,
Oh,
that person didn't close that B, and now it's just tradition. They have an H, whereas we don't.
oh,
So
interesting. That's interesting. Yeah,
yeah,
I didn't know that because I did music for 5 years. I played trumpet for five
okay,
years, and yeah, but I didn't know that about Germany.
yeah. So it's very odd, but and everyone kind of realizes like, yeah, someone in history just forgot to close that B, and now it's an H. But
Hmm.
it's just like the tradition, I guess.
That is a really good way to learn language actually, where you learn a language by taking a class for another skill in that language. So a music class in
Mhm,
German, dance class in Japanese, a whatever it is.
mhm,
I interviewed just last week. I interviewed someone on the podcast as well, and she was saying that she learned French by going to France. She spent a number of years, I forget how many, but a number of years in France. But when she first went, she spoke no French, but she was going to theater school. So she would just watch what they're doing and just copy what people were doing. And she's very calm. She doesn't get anxious or nervous that she doesn't understand what people are saying. She's very calm about that. So being in that environment, she's able to learn because she just watches and hears, and then she can go, "Oh, I wonder if that word means that. I wonder if, oh, when the teacher says that, I wonder if that's what I'm supposed to do." Then she will listen to it, test it out, see if anything weird happens. If someone comments like, "Why did you do that?" Because then she would know, "Oh, that I clearly had that word wrong."
mhm.
So yeah, that's good. And you were in Germany for 3 years?
Yeah, 3 years. I'm trying to think. Yeah, 3 years. Yeah,
Okay.
that's right.
Wow. And then when you came back, you didn't, did you continue any German studies?
So actually, after I left Germany, I went to Denmark for a year.
Ah,
So
okay.
I was a volunteer at a special needs boarding school there, because they have this awesome program, the Erasmus Plus program, which is for young people in all of Europe to go to another country and to maybe learn the language and help out some way, help society in some way. So because I had permanent residence in Germany at the time, I was able to do this, and I was under 30. So I lived in Germany and in Denmark for a whole school year for 10 months. And that was quite an interesting experience because um, none of the students spoke English, or very few of them spoke any English. So I had to learn Danish like right away. And that was quite an interesting experience because um, like I can't think of a better immersion experience than being in a special needs classroom where the teacher speaks slowly so the students can understand. and then you have to interact slowly with the students so they can understand you, but you have to learn quickly. Like you have no other option. Otherwise, I can't communicate with them. So yeah, I was there for 1 year, and then I came back to Canada after that. And because I had a background in German, it helped me pick up the Danish a lot quicker because there is a lot of similarities between the two. They're not exactly the same, but I would say they're closer than English and Danish. Like Danish and German is closer than English and Danish.
Okay.
But they're all interrelated. So if you know English, you have a better chance of learning Danish than if you know, I don't know, like Hindi or something, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Huh. So how did you learn Danish? Was it literally just through being immersed and
Yes.
figuring it out?
So I remember thinking like, okay, because I think in May of that year, or that I'm going to be going to Denmark in September, October. So I bought the books, and then I was doing Duolingo at the time, and I just would study for an hour every day, and I knew a little bit, but I couldn't like get by in Danish. But as soon as I got there, I feel like it went up exponentially. Like my skills went up exponentially, and my Danish is a lot worse than my German even today. But in that moment, it was like, I don't know, it felt like, this is like the magic potion to learn languages. It's like have a language that's similar and be fully immersed.
That's
Yeah.
interesting.
And yeah.
I had an experience like that with Portuguese.
Okay.
I was learning Spanish. I didn't speak it very well. I'd probably been learning it for maybe a year, maybe 2 years at the most. I want to say a year though. I don't think it was quite two. It was probably a year, between 1 and 2 years. I've been learning Spanish.
Mhm.
And then I went to Brazil for I think it was 2 weeks, maybe three at most. I think it was two though. And I was at my soccer team. We were training in Brazil. The training camp we were at, the trainer spoke English, but it wasn't great English. It was acceptable, but not the best. But we also had Brazilian kids with us, or teenagers with us, that were also training with our team. I don't know who they were, and they don't speak any English. So the trainers would train us in English, but also a lot of Portuguese, and sometimes it'd be just Portuguese. On top of that, I made this one friend. I don't know who he was. I just bumped into him one time at the training center. He was trying to learn English. He didn't speak any English. I didn't speak any Portuguese, but we decided we were going to help each other learn. So at lunchtime, he'd come and he would sit with me, and he had his little book, and we would try to help each other learn. He would try and help me Portuguese. I try and help him learn English. We don't have any language in common though. So, he probably spoke a few words of English. I spoke some Spanish with some Portuguese. I had a little pocket dictionary / phrase book that I had as well. So there's that. And then, I just wanted to learn. I used to watch, I think it was MTV or their version of MTV, some of the music videos, and they had subtitles.
Mhm.
Not always, sometimes the subtitles, so I could see words and think, oh, maybe that's like that Spanish word. Oh, maybe that's like that. Oh, I wonder if, when I see a CAO with a squiggly line, I wonder if that's the Spanish equivalent of CION, which it is. And so I would see like, oh, so I wonder if I can switch that in my head. And by the time I left, just two or 3 weeks, I was able to, I ordered a pizza on the phone for my whole team, and we got roughly what we wanted. Mostly what I thought I said is what we got. There's a few pizzas that are like extra this, or like we didn't get that, but basically what we ordered, we got. I was able to buy, there's these bracelets, like these custom bracelets that I saw were being sold. And I learned how to go and buy the bracelet, tell him what I wanted on it. He told me how many days it would take for him to make it. Like, do I pay now or do I pay after? Like, we had that whole interaction. I paid him, I got the bracelets. They said what I wanted them to say with their lettering on it and everything. So I would go shopping in markets. So I could shop in markets, and I could bargain in Portuguese. But it sounds very similar, where it's a little different than yours because you were working in a school and I was training soccer. I was with a lot of English speaking people. But I used a little bit of Spanish that I had, and then this very immersive environment. I was very motivated to learn, and it was, 2 weeks, be able to order pizza, like buy your bread. Like I don't know, that's amazing. I think, I think that's
I
pretty
would
darn
agree.
good,
Yeah.
right? But sounds very similar to what you're saying.
Yeah. And interesting you mentioned the speaking on the phone, because for me that's like the litmus test of have you
Right.
mastered the language, is if you can get by without the visual element. So if you can do that within 2 weeks, then you're doing something right for sure, and get like 90% of your message across or whatever.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah, I
I
probably couldn't do it now. I think back, I'm like, I don't know what I would, because I'm out of it. Like it's like you're Danish, or you're German or Danish. I'm sure you can probably relate. Although you're more fluent in those languages than I was in Portuguese, but like I feel like I was now, if I had to speak Portuguese, it would be really hard. But when I was there, much easier.
yeah,
Much easier.
yeah.
Do you get that too in German and Danish? Although you're more
Yeah,
fluent in both, but
definitely. Since I, well, funny enough, since I've left Denmark, I've spoken Danish not to my student maybe twice in Canada because there's just no speakers here. So you go from an environment where you're speaking, maybe half the time in Danish to Canada where English all the time, every day. So I've definitely lost a lot. And I found it's actually quite good to have to teach someone that because it's like a good refresher for myself. And then I have to double check those things. Is this how you correctly pronounce that? Is this like how they form whatever grammatical item? Because I have an idea in my head, but it's like it has cobwebs on it. I have to dust that off if I'm going to teach that to somebody.
right, makes sense. So you learn German through intensive lessons and living in Germany, living and breathing the German
Mhm.
language in Germany. You learn Danish through basically full immersion, essentially through immersion.
Basically, yeah.
Some self-study with your book and everything. You've been learning French for a number of years now,
Hmm.
and then you've been learning Spanish for. So how many years of French and how many years of Spanish? It's been longer for French, I know, but
French a lot longer, and that's more like I was always interested in French. Like I took it in high school, and I grew up in a very small town, so I don't want to say that the teaching was lacking, but like small town BC, not the greatest. There's no French immersion in my town, so it was mostly vocabulary classes, which is fine. But after I learned German, I thought I'll learn French, and then Danish got in the way. And so when I returned to Canada, I thought, yeah, I'll pick up French. And I actually started, I started a degree at the University of Calgary as linguistics because I thought I love languages. I love everything to do with languages. So I took one linguistics class and I said to myself, I can't do this for 4 years. I have to change my major. So that's why I changed. I thought, because French was my minor at the time, like just make that my major. And the honestly, the honest reason why I picked Spanish, I had no intention on learning Spanish, was because if I had French and Spanish double major, I didn't have to do as many French literature classes. So
oh,
that's literally the only reason I picked Spanish. But in the meantime, I've grown to love Spanish, especially the ease, like how easily I picked it up. Not saying that I'm fluent by any means, not even close. But I don't know. If you're comparing French and Spanish, I would say Spanish is a lot easier to get into, like on the bottom floor, and
yeah.
actually like productive language. Um, Harder grammar later on, but French is like it's the pronunciation monster, I would say. Like
Yeah,
that's
I agree.
really the killer for me. And yeah, okay. So you would feel the same that if someone came up to you and said, what should I learn? Like, what do you think, French or Spanish? You would say that the same basic thing, that like easier to get productive language
I think
in
it's easier.
Spanish.
Spanish is easier, like rough. If you were to compare the difficulty of both languages, they're probably the same, roughly speaking. Maybe a couple things are a little easier in Spanish, a couple are a little easier in French, maybe, but roughly speaking, the same difficulty. But in the beginning, as a beginner, French is much more difficult.
Mhm.
Way more vowel sounds. like way more. Some difficult letters too, like the R's are difficult. Spanish has R's too, which are hard, um, but French has like R's. Like actually, now that I'm thinking out loud, it's mostly the vowels that are tough. Like all the
Mhm.
different vowels. Then and then also you can't just look at a word and know how to say it, so that's tough. All the silent letters. And then you can't just ask questions, which sucks. In French, you can't just learn instantly how to ask questions. It's like est-ce que and stuff, like est-ce que, blah. And that's really weird as a beginner. But Spanish, you look at the word, it's pretty easy to learn how to pronounce things, at least acceptably well. Asking questions is very straightforward. So immediately you can start to kind of talk to people and understand and have some little interactions. And then you have the fact that a lot of the Latino people are quite warm and friendly and welcoming. Not to say francophones aren't, but that's not one thing they're known for, right? Whereas Latino people in general, they're known for being
Mhm.
warm and open. So there's that additional factor. Plus, people travel, at least in Canada, they travel more to Mexico and Spain, maybe, right? They're going to
Mhm.
resorts and things like that. So they already have um, maybe a positive view of it. Not that they don't have a positive view of French, but boy, they're thinking of beaches and sipping pina coladas on the beach, whereas French, they don't have that same imagery, so they might
Mhm.
feel differently as it is. So yeah, definitely for at least North English native English speakers in North America, at least, I
Mhm.
would be like, yeah, it's easier to get in. It's typically easier to get into Spanish in the beginning, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, if you
Yeah.
speak French like you did, or even if you were learning French and then you went to Spanish, it's easier to make that transition.
Mhm.
It's easier.
Yeah, I think, yeah, for sure. It's easier. Also, if you know another Romance language, because uh, when I was in Germany, there was two people in my immersion class. One was from Spain, and one was well, spoke fluent Italian, and they could understand each other basically.
Mm,
And of course, they had like the helper language of German as well if something doesn't make sense. But they could basically converse like maybe not like friends or something, but like they could get their message across. And those are two totally different languages. But just because there's so many similarities, you can get your message across.
mm.
Yeah.
So how have you gotten about learning French and Spanish? Just through your university classes and other classes you've taken, like private lessons
Yeah.
like that?
So I've
Ineffective.
taken, yeah, a few private lessons with yourself. But honestly, it's been mostly the university level courses, which, if you're asking my honest opinion, that's probably one of the least effective ways to master a language is to take university level courses. And it's probably one of the most expensive too. You get a very specific set of skills, but it's only because you feel like you will fail if, or you might not get a good mark if you don't finish the assignments. It's not that the assignments are great or you get a lot out of them. So personally, I personally love free resources, freely available resources, things like YouTube based courses, or there's some, can't think of the name right now, but there's like textbooks that people have made because they're kind of fed up with publishers charging hundreds of dollars for something that's okay, that doesn't really need like a second edition every year that costs another $100. So I also used to use Duolingo a lot. I actually had a 3,000 day streak at one point, but
Wow.
not a real, that's not real because they have like the streak freezes where if you don't do the practice for a day, you like get a streak freeze and save your streak. So I probably only had like maybe a 300-day streak in real life, but it said 3,000. And the reason I moved on from that is because I feel like it's gotten a little too easy. Like there's one exercise in particular that really bugs me where you get a sentence and then you have to translate it into English. But all the words that you need are at the bottom and you just move those into the right
Mm.
spot. So that doesn't do it for me. That doesn't like help me a lot. It helps you to refine maybe your English syntax, But yeah, I find that Duolingo, they used to be really good, but they're not what they used to be. Um, there's a new one that I just want to plug. I am not affiliated with in any way. It's linguno.com. So for whatever reason, all these language ones are like bird related. It's like a penguin is their mascot. Um, and that one is based on like spaced repetition, and it has like a vocabulary element, a listening element. I think there's a speaking element as well. And I think there's around 6 languages that it works with. And for right now, it's free because it's in the alpha stage or beta stage. So give that one a try, linguno.com, while it's still free. But for right now, yeah, honestly, I'm taking a little break over the summer just because my language courses were a little bit intense this year. But yeah, I'm a big fan of the free open source materials that are available, especially YouTube courses.
Hmm.
Because there's one guy also in if you're looking for comprehensible input, uh, Dreaming Spanish on YouTube is excellent. And yeah, it looks like you
Big
know who
fan.
that
Yeah, I'm a
is.
big fan of it. Yeah.
And there's also a guy, I think the name of the channel is like French Comprehensible Input or something.
He's also
But
really good. Yeah.
yeah, so I love those videos because I always get something out of it. And yeah, they're super helpful. And the one thing that I find that I'm really missing is like a place to practice.
Hmm.
So you can get really good on your own at listening and vocabulary, grammar, but you need to find an outlet to speak to native speakers. And that's, I think, one element that people usually neglect a little bit in their when they're learning languages, because you can be amazing at grammar, syntax, like everything except you can't string a sentence together in real life. And that's not really, I don't know. For me, that's my goal, is to like be able to speak the language and be like a productive speaker of the language. I don't really care if I'm a great speller or if I'm making small mistakes here and there. It's about, can I communicate my message to a native speaker or just a second language speaker? Can I get my message across in a second language?
Hmm. Right. Yeah, you said a lot of, you said so many things that I'd love to
Sorry,
comment on. They're really, really good. Okay, let's see. Let's start with it's interesting. You said you find that university courses are the worst way to learn a language, I think you said. So I'm curious, what did you think of your class? Because you spoke quite highly of your classes in Germany, where you're doing 20 hours a week of class in Germany.
Mhm.
Why did you like those, but you don't like your university classes as much? Because that's in university, roughly speaking, what you're doing is you're taking 20 hours of language classes a week, roughly speaking. It's more expensive, definitely than $2 an hour, $3 an hour. But what was different in Germany when you're taking those classes?
Well, for one thing, university professors are generally not teachers, and
Mm,
they're generally professionals in their subject material, but they're not taught how to teach in any way, shape, or form. So, and that's one of my biggest gripes with the university education system, is that they're expected to teach um, like their subject material, and they're amazing at it, or they're amazing at their subject, but they're not amazing at teaching. So the student actually doesn't get a lot out of the classes, even if you have the best, like the top pros of the industry. If they don't know how to teach, you're not going to get anything out of the class. And whereas in Germany, um, one teacher I remember in particular, he was immigrant or refugee from Czechoslovakia. I think it's called Czechia now. And he had to learn German as a second language. So, and he had to be certified to be a German as a second language teacher. So not only did he have that experience of learning the language himself as a non-native speaker, he also had to learn how to teach. So that made the experience a lot more enjoyable for
Right.
me. Um, and it always depends on the teacher too. If you have an amazing teacher, they can make the boring material come alive. If you have a terrible teacher, they can make the most amazing lesson plan super boring. So it all depends on like finding the right fit for you, I guess. Yeah. So, and in general, I find that university professors are not great teachers.
Hmm. Yeah, my perspective on university classes to learn a language is roughly the same as yours, but we have some differences. So first of all, I wouldn't say it's the worst way to learn per se. It's yeah, I wouldn't say it's the worst. I also don't think it's crazily overpriced. So for example, like
Okay.
my Mandarin class I took last semester was, I think it's $800 or something like that, which is a lot of money. But when you do the math of how many hours of class you're getting, I think it ends up being like $19 an hour or something like that, which is not nothing, but it's not completely unreasonable. And you have access to your office hour once a week, which you can use for whatever you want. No one goes to it in those language classes. No one uses the office hour, or
Hmm.
very few people do. And there's always, as you know, for example, at UC, they have like the French Center and the Spanish Center, and they have, it's a place you can go as often as you want, whenever you want to go practice. I'm not sure if you have that in Lethbridge, but um, in University of Calgary they have that. So there's you're paying for that as well. So when all said and done, it's a lot of money because you're paying a lot up front, but you're getting access to so many hours of education. Now, I agree with you in the sense that most of the professors are not very good at teaching the material. They're average at best. There's some rare exceptions. There are some exceptions, but generally speaking, no, they're not. They're not trained in teaching languages. Well, they're not trained in teaching, and they're definitely not trained in teaching languages.
Hmm.
So, um, so I would agree with that. But overall, like I've learned a lot from university for my French and Spanish, for example. Like I would not have the level I have in French and Spanish if it weren't for my French and Spanish degree. Just in spite of everything you're saying.
Hmm.
Same with Mandarin. Like I would not have the level I have in Mandarin if it weren't for all the classes I've taken in university or even just other private language schools, where again, the quality of education is average at best. Sometimes you get that gold, you get that diamond in the rough, and you get that instructor who's like amazing. You're like, wow. But generally it's okay, right? They're
Hmm.
okay. But I've always still found it worth it personally.
Yeah, you make some good points that like there is definitely something there. Like you'll get something out of it for sure. Um, but I think about a service I used last summer, Baselang, and I
Mm,
know you know this person, and I think about I can spend I think it's around $200 Canadian, 150 US, and I can have access basically all day, every day to native Spanish speakers versus spending $700-800 for a couple hours a week of access to maybe a native speaker. So if you're looking at it
right,
that way, um, yeah, I feel like it's not it's not overly okay. Maybe it is. It's expensive, but it's like you do get something out of it. But there's more effective ways, in my
right.
opinion,
I
to
think what I
get
like,
that
you're right, yeah, like the
conversation.
baseline, for example, like they're a really great program. I think it's 100, I think you're right, it's 150 or $200 a month, and you get
Mhm.
unlimited Spanish lessons, which is wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Um, and that's uh probably that might just be the cheapest place for someone to go and get Spanish lessons. That might be the cheapest place to go on the internet.
Hmm.
If you've got a lot of time on your hands and you're willing to, if you really want to go do 3 4 hours a day or something, 2 hours a day, even an hour a day, really, even an hour a day,
Hmm.
um, that might be one of the cheapest places to go. I think the one difference I see for university classes is that there's far more accountability because you have to pass your class to take the next one. It's always highly structured classes, whereas on a baseline or something may or may not be.
Mhm.
And I have found that even when how do I say this? The quality of instruction in universities, as you said, is not great. It's not the best in those language classes, but there are a few things they do well that you don't get, in my experience, with Mandarin, French, and Spanish, that you don't get elsewhere. So typically, they have a very deep understanding of grammar. So if you ever have grammar
Mhm.
questions, you'll probably get it answered. Even if it's a really complicated one, you'll
Mhm.
probably get it answered well enough. Now, maybe not, depends on the professor, but probably you have the ability to get the answer to your question, which you would not necessarily get from, a tutor or an instructor off some website, Baselang or italki or whatever it is. Um, Even if the instructor doesn't have the answer, it's highly likely you'll find it in a textbook. Now, it's written in very verbose language. It's written in grammarian language, so you might have to like really read it carefully and like think about it, but you can get the answer, which is there as well. Um, and then the other thing is, I think you can become far more advanced in that university environment than you could. Not that you couldn't. How do I say this? The university environment, it creates an environment, provided you're doing your own self-study and you're taking control of your own learning outside of class and you're trying to learn on your own time too, and the university is one piece of the equation. It provides you the opportunity to really get to this highly, highly advanced level, well beyond anything you'd get from any other classes, because you might have to write a 25-page essay and do it well and read the research on it. And um, well, yeah, read and understand the research, write a nuanced essay. Like, boy, that's hard. Not to say we don't do that in day-to-day life, so it's not a practical life skill to be able to do. But to be able to do that, ooh, you got to have a strong, really high level, or to read the books they make you read and to critique them and discuss them in class and debate with your
Mhm.
classmates, debate with the instructor. Not to mention for French and Spanish and even Mandarin, now that I just took a high level class, once you get to the high level classes, they're all native speakers anyway, except for you or me rather. Like they're all native or high or near native speakers. Like you'll be like I've been among the worst. In French and Spanish, French not as much. French they weren't that many. There weren't that many native speakers actually, but Spanish they were all native speakers. Um, Mandarin, the class I just took, there's a girl from Malaysia who was basically by English or Mandarin English bilingual. There was a lot of Cantonese speakers who had a strong base. There were I took another class where they were literally all native speakers except for me. Like they applauded me to even show up in the class, to have the like guts to do it. Um, and like that's a really like it's a great learning environment, like in many ways. Now, but I agree with what you're saying. In certain many ways, it's also not because you can't just rely on the class to teach you. You can't just say, I'm gonna go to my classes and woohoo, I'm gonna learn. No,
Yeah.
you can't do that, right? Which is so, and that's a big drawback. It is a big drawback, right?
Mhm.
So, yeah.
I have kind of an unrelated question. What do
Mhm.
you think about the usage of these kind of emerging technologies, Chat GPT, the AIs, um, and their role in language learning? Do you feel like that's going to be like the next big thing to teach yourself a language, or is it kind of just like it'll never the like native speakers will never be replaced? What's your
I don't know if they'll
opinion?
be replaced. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if the AI will replace them. I don't
Yeah,
know,
okay, not
but
replaced, but
definitely it's really. I use it a lot for my lesson prep. Like,
mhm,
boy, it really helps with lesson prep.
mhm,
I've been teaching my students how to use it for them to learn outside of class. So just yesterday, I taught a student how to use it to teach to tell Chat GPT to be a person for you to talk to, because you can tell it to do that, and then it'll practice
mhm.
with you like a real person. And you can even tell it what you want to practice. So when they'll lead the conversation in a way where you're practicing something very specific. So if you're trying to
Okay,
practice a grammar point, or if you want to get better at a certain type of conversation, you can tell it to guide the conversation that direction, which is really helpful. It's also helpful for learning. Well, you can. It's kind of like it's like having a teacher, access to a teacher, really, because you can. Like I was writing an essay for my Mandarin class that I just submitted a week and a bit ago, 2 weeks ago, and like sometimes I try to write a sentence and I was like, I think that's right, but I'm not 100% sure. And normally what I'd have to do is I'd have to wait, or I'd have to like ask a friend or text it to someone, wait for them to answer, and they go, well, this is right, but you need to replace that character because blah, blah, blah. Well, now I just ask ChatGPT, hey, I'm writing this essay, I wrote this sentence. Does that sound okay? And then ChatGPT says, well, it does, but your usage of this is incorrect. You might consider saying this instead. And I might say, then I can reply and I can say, well, oh, why can't I use this character? Oh, well, that character would make a native speaker think this, and that's not what you're trying to convey. And I might go, well, actually, ChatGPT, you misunderstood. I am trying to say that. Oh, and of course, it acts like a human, right? So it says. So I don't know. I do think it's a very powerful, it is a very powerful tool. I found it helpful for prepping my lessons and also for learning languages. Less so for Gujarati. It's really bad at Gujarati. It's really not
Mhm.
helpful for Gujarati. I read the stuff it tells me and it's grammatically wrong. I asked it to make me a lesson plan for a class teaching the past tense with intransitive verbs. And because I wanted to use that and then cut and paste certain things and modify it and add on it. But it was garbage. I couldn't use it at all. It was saying
Mhm.
like, oh, the past tense in Gujarati works like this. And I was like, no, that's not at all how it works. What are you talking about? And I was like, okay, no.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I guess it's only as strong as the data set that it's
Yeah,
learned from, and the English data set is, massive, but the Gujarati data set is probably minuscule.
yeah.
So that makes sense, and that is frustrating because you'd think like, oh, it's super powerful in English, it's powerful in every language, but no, it's still developing, and I don't think a minority language like Gujarati would ever get up to the level of sophistication for the AI that
Even
English.
Russian. So I was talking to Catherine. I don't think she said it on the podcast, but you've met Catherine, right? Did you guys ever
Yes,
have
many
calls
times.
meetings together?
Pardon me?
Or did you ever have meetings together when we had our weekly meetings? Did you have
No,
meetings?
but I used to attend her weekly Spanish
Oh,
ones.
okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she was telling me that if she's used ChatGPT for her Russian, well, for a lot of her classes, but Russian, she said it's funny that apparently the way ChatGPT talks in Russian is 100% correct. It's perfect, it's excellent, but there's something with Russian that your word order is quite flexible. I don't really know why, because I don't speak Russian. And
Mm.
apparently the word order that ChatGPT has chosen, it makes it sound like a excellent uh like a native or near like a native level American who learned Russian. Like an American who learned Russian and now speaks it like perfectly. Like no errors. It sounds like that because of the word order. So it's all fine, but you're like, oh, you're American.
That's fantastic.
So it's like Chat GPT's American in Russian. I was like, oh, interesting. But
Fantastic.
huh. I was gonna ask you something about so so for your Spanish and for your French, so do you do anything since you're not overly pleased with how you're being taught in university, do you do anything else to learn or are you finding that effective for you? Are you getting better?
Um, I am getting better for sure because actually a while ago I was cleaning out my computer hard drive and I found like my old assignments from first year French, and they're garbage. Like
Hmm.
the things I was saying, like just wrong. So I'm definitely improving, but I guess not as fast as I thought I would because I
Right.
was using it as like, oh, I took this many hours in Germany. And so by this many hours in French, even in a university course, I should be at the same level, but it's nowhere near. Um, and I thought like it could have something to do with because it's a Romance language and it's not, because English and German are very close. And I think this is my theory. I'm curious to see what you think about it, but a lot of English speakers try to pick up French and then they get turned off by how difficult it is because it's so different. And then they think like, oh, I'm not a language person, just because the gap between the languages is so, well, it's not huge, but it's bigger than between, let's say, Danish and English or German and English. So they think like, well, that's what learning languages is, and I'm no good at it, and then they drop it. But if you pick a language that's closer, then it's actually a lot easier. And then once you know that other language, you can kind of like springboard off that
Hmm.
to learn the second language. I don't know. What's your thoughts about that?
Maybe. Yeah, could be.
Maybe.
Maybe. I haven't. Yeah, could be. I don't have a lot of thoughts on that.
Okay.
Hmm.
Something I
Because
think
it's true,
about
a
a
lot of
lot.
people, but I like here's some of the things going through my mind. Like I think about people who try to learn new skills. And anytime you have any new, I think I could be wrong about this, but I think a lot of new skills I've seen, there's always a drop off. If 100 people try to learn the skill, by the time you get to the equivalent of the first level of achievement, whatever that is, right? Maybe it's an
Mhm.
A1 in a language, it's a certain level in swimming, it's a different belt in a martial art, it's a whatever it is, right? Like the most number of like if 100 people started on day one, only 20 get to that first level of achievement or whatever. Some very small percentage get there. So I wonder if that's just that's how it is
Mm.
when people try to learn things. That most people just drop off regardless of what the difficulty felt like. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. That's a good point. That maybe it's just like a human thing to, ah, this is hard. I'm giving up.
But then again, like certain things, like right now, I think I've told you I'm doing swim lessons, right? I think I might have told you.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah.
So I'm doing swim lessons and I'm doing jujitsu. And swimming is much easier and more relaxing than jujitsu. So I've done 10 hours of swim lessons. Very quickly, I'll have done more jujitsu than swimming very quickly because I do more jujitsu lessons than swim lessons. So I'll have caught up very quickly. In like 2 weeks, I'll have caught up basically. I feel like I can do more in swimming in the time that I've put in because it's an easier skill. And whereas in jujitsu, I feel like in the next, if I do 3 more weeks of jujitsu and 3 more weeks of swimming, in 3 more weeks of swimming, I might be able to swim a lap, maybe. Like I cannot die in the water now. That's pretty cool. In 10 hours, I can actually like not die in water for a while.
Hmm.
Like I can go on my back, I can float, I can kind of keep myself afloat, I can kind of get sort of move around the pool, kind of sort of. Not on my front, just on my back, because like I can float and breathe and it's easier. That's like 10 hours. In 10 hours, able to figure that out. In 10 hours of jujitsu, like I think I'll lose, I'll be tapped out every single time I go. I'm gonna suck at it.
Hmm.
So I also think like there is certain things that maybe are more difficult initially, or there's more pain, not necessarily physical, but there's more hurdles to overcome, possibly. I was just today, I had the thought that jujitsu is exactly like language learning, except with your body. I had that thought today. I was like, oh, these are exactly the same things. Oh my God. I see why people would quit jujitsu and I see why people would quit a language. I totally get it. Because in jujitsu, what happens is, you learn a couple movements. It's like wrestling. It's kind of like wrestling jujitsu for people that don't know what it looks like. It kind of looks like wrestling if you don't know the difference. Um, so you learn like a few moves. Like you might learn a trip, you might learn a couple defensive things, and then you're just like rolling with people. You might be rolling with rolling is like wrestling, basically. They call rolling wrestling, or they call wrestling rolling. And then you're rolling with people, and there's all levels in a class, right? Now, if you're working with someone much better than you, they're gonna take it a little easier because they know you're a white belt. They're not gonna just kill you because they know they're not trying to hurt you, right? But you're not gonna win. So you're gonna learn your 3 moves, and you're gonna try your 3 moves, and in theory, the one move should throw the person off your body. But of course, they're more experienced, so they know a counter move to it. It's like chess; they know the counter move. Now, me as a beginner, I haven't learned the counter move, so I do my thing. I'm like, oh, that didn't work. And next thing you know, they're doing this knee on belly, and they got my arms all wrapped up in my necks, and I can't breathe. I'm tapping out. It's like, what the heck just happened? Um, and then someone tells you, oh, you probably should have like done this in that situation, and you go, oh, I got it. And then next time you're in the same situation, you go, oh, I know what to do, and you do it, and somehow it kind of worked, but not really. And then you still lose. And you're like, what the heck? What? What happened there? Oh, you lost your base. Oh, I lost my base. Oh, keep your base. Okay. So language, same thing. You learn like 7 things, whatever you learn, right? You learn some greetings, you learn how are you learn whatever you learn, right? And then you go and talk to someone and you say, hey, how are you? And no, you say, hi, how are you? And they go, hey, not bad. How about you? And you're like, oh no, you didn't say good. How about you? Not bad. What did he say? And then they tell you, oh, not bad is like same as good. Oh, I got it now. Hey, how are you? Ah, couldn't be better. How about you? Couldn't. What? Oh, couldn't be better is like good. Oh, okay. And then you go talk to someone else and they use some verb tense you've never heard. And you're like, what's that? And then you're like, oh, this is like, I did it yesterday. It's like a past. Past. Oh, I don't know. I don't know past. You learn the past. And then you find out there's 2 past tenses. You're like, there's 2? I thought there's 1. And then you keep going and there's a 3rd past tense that shows up. And you're like, 3? What? And then, oh my God. And then you're like, oh yeah, I guess I don't know how to say that type of thing. And the more you talk to people, like you just always bump into things you didn't know. And you're like, I don't know what to do about that. And then you're stuck. And jujitsu so far has been exactly the same thing, except more physical. I forget how that's connected to your question, but yeah.
The Azren Jiu-Jitsu theory.
Yeah.
I like it.
Cool. Well, we can start to wrap up here. Did you want to share any parting thoughts about learning or teaching? We didn't even get to talk about how you teach, but that's okay.
That's okay. Yeah, I don't know. I guess have realistic expectations. Don't think that just because you pay for something that you're going to be fluent in 30 days or something. You have to work for it. And it's all worth it in the end when you are able to open those doors just because of your hard work. It's all worth it. So it's definitely changed my life in a very meaningful way, just learning different languages. It's not something I ever considered as like a career, but now here I am. And it's also something I have a part-time job doing. So I would say if you think you can't do it or you want to give up, just do one more day. Just keep going. And it's all worth it. I don't know. That's kind of cheesy, but
Cool. For anyone listening, if you do want to learn, if you do want to take English, German, or even possibly Danish lessons with Logan, I think he's got, as we're recording this, he's got, I don't know, space for like 1 more, I think, probably.
yep, we got room
Like
for one more.
One last student. So if you want to be that one last one, you're welcome to reach out. And Logan's also teaching in May. When's May? I forget what day you do yours on, but that's okay. I'll put it in the description. Mid-May, Logan's gonna be teaching a class on what's the grammar point? I can't remember.
The German spoken pass, which is also called the perfect.
Okay, so on the perfect on that, we'll
Very
have
good.
yes, I'll be doing it'll be a 4-week class on that. So if you're interested in learning that, I'll put a Google form or something in the description. You guys can click that and sign up. So far, Logan, I think I haven't posted on the Google form. I think there were 10 people or something like that were interested.
Wow.
Something, I'll actually check it right now. Oh no, less than that. 6 people on the Google form so far. But I haven't posted it to Meetup or anything yet. So cool.
So
All right, everybody, thank you for listening. Hope you liked it. That was a fun interview, and we'll chat later.